famous and well-known Rabbi Abram Twersky, you probably know, he's a psychiatrist and a fabulous Talmud Chacham, now quite an elderly gentleman with a sense of humour. And he likes to say that he's written, I think it's over 36 books, but he likes to say, in actual fact, he's only written one book 36 times. And I think I could honestly say I have thousands on file of different shiurim. But the truth of the matter is, if I boil it down to what I really talk about, it's only a few important things which keeps coming up again and again and again. And one of the most important things of all is what it says right at the beginning of Pirkei Avos, Asa lecha Rav, get for yourself a rabbi. And I think that's such an important teaching and such an important message for a very simple reason, because nobody sees themselves clearly. Nobody knows who and what they really are, because we're all rather biased in our own favour. Think of the last time you went to a wedding and then the photographer shows you the album where the whole family were gathered around for the family portrait. Whose picture did you look for first? Well, of course we all look for ourselves because we're rather focused on ourselves, but because we're too focused on ourselves, we often don't see the big picture and where we fit into the big picture. In fact, Rabbi Dessler says a person could go through his or her entire life and not discover the truth about yourself, except if you happen to bump into something very dramatic that happens to you, where, as it were, you get to see yourself for the first time. And there's a story told about Reb Shalom Shvadron, the great Maggid from Yerushalayim. One day Reb Shalom Shvadron, who was already an old man with a long white beard, was walking in his neighbourhood of Shari Chesed in Yerushalayim. He's walking along the road, and there was an old Yiddish Baba, a grandmother standing outside her apartment, and she saw the great and well-known tzaddik coming down the road, and when he got near her, she gave a demure, a tzniistic little nod in his direction, and he gave a demure little nod back in her direction. And at the other end of the street, there was a bunch of little boys doing what little boys do best, which is dangerous stuff. They were walking along a wall as though it was a tightrope, balancing themselves. And one of the little boys lost his balance and fell and hit the sidewalk with quite a bang. The grandma, the Baba, looked, saw it was her grandson, and gave, as they say in Yiddish, a geschrei, ah! And started to run towards her grandson. Reb Shalom Shvadron, the great tzaddik, said to her, Daigen nicht, don't worry, soll sein good. He assured her in Yiddish, it will be fine. As she got halfway towards the little boys, she realised that her old eyes had deceived her. It wasn't, in fact, her grandson who'd fallen at all. It was his grandson. So she turned round and she shouted, Ist nicht meine Enkel, ist deine Enkel. And Reb Shalom Shvadron, the great tzaddik from Yerushalayim, said, ah! And he started to run down the road. So what happened to Daigenish, don't worry, soll sein good? Well, the answer is, that's what you think your perspective is until you find yourself in a tricky situation like that one, and then suddenly you discover something about yourself that you didn't know was there. I was in London a few months ago, and I went to attend an annual retreat for something called Camp Simcha. And one of my old friends there, a rabbi himself, is suffering very badly from cancer at the moment, but he should have a refuah shlema. And I went to see him. And he told me an incredible story. The story revolves around a chassid who went to see his Rabbi because he had a big problem. The problem was he had a temper, a terrible temper. I think the phrase is a rageaholic. And he simply couldn't control it. And when he lost his temper, there was no holding the fellow back, and he screamed and he shouted, and his wife suffered terribly as a consequence, and his children suffered terribly, and the people he worked with suffered terribly. And he regretted it the moment afterwards, but the damage had already been done, so he went to speak to his Rebbe to ask for advice. So the Rebbe listened very carefully as he told all his stories and all the terrible damage that his temper and anger has created. And after a few moments, the Rebbe said, I'd like you to do me a favor. This is a big question. I want to give you the right answer. Go outside in the hallway, you'll find a seat outside my room in the hallway. Have a seat there for a few minutes. Let me think what's the best advice to give you. And the chassid nodded and went outside, and he sat down in the chair that was opposite the Rebbe's room. Meanwhile, the Rebbe's assistant, his shamus, saw the fellow was sitting outside and came in to ask the Rebbe, did he want a cup of tea or would he like a coffee? The Rebbe said, come here, come here. And the shamus leant across the table. He said, that chassid of mine, the fellow sitting outside, he's come to me with a terrible problem. He's got an awful temper. I'd like to get a feel of exactly what the temper looks like, how bad it is. So when you go outside, provoke him. Get him to lose his temper. So the shamus, okay, the Rebbe said so. So out went the chassid, and he passed the fellow sitting in the chair, and he went into the kitchen and he brought out a tray as though he was bringing the Rebbe a cup of coffee. There was a pot of coffee, boiling hot coffee on it, milk, sugar, cookies, the whole thing. And as he walked past the chassid, he pretended to trip and he dropped the entire thing right into the lap of the chassid with a terrible temper. The chassid leapt up and said, don't worry, it could happen to anybody. Well, the shamus is failing in his duties, so he said, well, if you hadn't stuck your great big feet out, I wouldn't have tripped over them. Which he hadn't done. But the chassid said, you know what? You're quite right. I do have big feet. So the shamus gathers all the debris from the floor, puts it back in the tray, and comes into the Rebbe, who'd heard the whole thing anyway, and said, tried. The Rebbe said, it doesn't matter. Out you go. And so, out goes the shamus, in comes the chassid. The Rebbe said, are you okay? And he's still got milk stains and coffee all over his jacket. He said, yeah, I'm fine. Sit down. Are you sure you're okay? He said, yeah, I'm fine. He said, I heard the whole thing. And the chassid said, yeah. Forgive me, but you came to see me because you've got a terrible temper, yes? Yes. I didn't see much evidence just now of this terrible temper. And a little smile played on the lips of the chassid and said, well, to tell you the truth, Rabbi, I heard you telling the shamus that you should come out and get me to lose my temper. And the Rebbe said, as a matter of fact, to tell you the truth, I know you did. I meant you to hear me telling him to go out and get you to lose your temper. You see, you came to see me today because you think you've got a problem with your temper. No, you don't. You've got a problem with your emunah. You see, when you heard that me telling the shamus that this is what should happen, you were perfectly okay with it. If the Rebbe says that this is what happened, you understood there's a reason behind it. I wanted it to happen. I wanted to see your temper. You had no difficulty with that whatsoever, or being macabre what I said should happen at all. But when the real Rebbe, when Hashem Yisborach makes things go wrong in your life, that's not your reaction. You get angry. The problem is you understand it when it comes from me. You don't understand it when it comes from Hashem. You think you've got a problem with your temper? Not at all. You've got a problem with your emunah. And just as we said, a person could go through their entire life and not see themselves for who and what they really are. And therefore it's like somebody who's not well taking the wrong medicine. You'll never get yourself cured. That's why it's so essential to have a rabbi. Asalach Rav. And even though I've got thousands of shirim, and I say them all over the world, I keep coming back to just one or two basic ideas. And that one, I think, is probably the most important of all. If you want to succeed in your own journey through life, you need somebody who's able to look at you from the outside and tell you what your real problems are and give you the prescription, the medicine that's going to solve that particular problem, so that you don't go through life understanding the wrong thing about yourself, but you understand the right thing about yourself and how to get it right. So getting yourself a rabbi, I think, is probably the most important Jewish teaching of all.